Hey, what's up, Trojan fans? Ryan Dyrud here. Wasn't able to jump on the live post-game with both Coach and Madman on our USC LAFB show, so wanted to just jump on here real quick and give a couple thoughts after that tough loss to Penn State and kind of where USC sits now at 3-3. Thoughts on Lincoln Riley and kind of the future of the program. So, as always, drop all your comments. Much appreciated. Down below. If you haven't subscribed to the USC LAFB YouTube channel, please hit that like and subscribe. It helps us out. It means the world to us. And you can find all of our USC coverage on LAFBnetwork.com. But, obviously tons of talk, rightfully so, where this program is right now. Year 3 of Lincoln Riley, sitting at 3-3. Not great against top opponents. Penn State being a top 5 opponent this week. They're now ranked 3rd after that overtime win. And then obviously you had the Michigan loss when they were, I want to say they were ranked right around 10 when they played. I can't remember. Now they're obviously dropped after losing to Washington. But yeah, the resume wasn't able to beat Utah in the Pac-12 and get over that. So I get all that. And that's a whole conversation of where he needs to be. I think when you look at the history of coaches, if we're going to sit here and say, is Lincoln Riley Nick Saban? That's an emphatic no. Is Lincoln Riley to this point Kirby Smart? We could probably say no. Has he had the success of Kalen DeBoer? Could probably say no. In DeBoer's coaching tenure, he's won and built everywhere he's gone. So I think that the barometer of where Lincoln Riley sits is the expectation is to be Nick Saban. And when you don't meet that, it's immediate, horrible, fire him. You can win, I think, at SC. And I believe and this is, again, I'm not coming on here to defend Lincoln Riley, or I know there's, it's kind of, I don't want to even say it's split, but there's the Fire Lincoln already crowd, and then there's some that are really defending him. I'm kind of in the middle. Like I see the gaps that haven't been met, and I'll get to that in a second. But I think that the firing's not going to happen. I think he has at least through year 4, unless this year the wheels come off and they finish like 4-8, and that's a different story. But as long as they keep building and you see some growth, which I'll talk about too, I think he has at least until the end of next year. That would put him, 4 years in. The buyout at that point, we don't know for sure. Obviously, private university, but is probably closer to that $60 million range as opposed to being, 80 right now, 75, whatever. But anyway, that's way far down. I just think it's not going to happen unless the wheels completely fall off, because in college it's very different. It's not the pros, right? Even though we have NIL and stuff now, you still are basically killing your recruiting class if you were to fire a head coach in the middle of their tenure, especially in the middle of a season, and then you're kind of starting from scratch. So anyway, besides the point. But when you look even at, getting back to my point of like coaching comparisons, a lot of really, really good or even great college coaches took them a minute to get to that mountaintop. And, when you look at Jim Harbaugh, for instance, right? Year, whatever it was, 9 when he won the Natty. Year, I think, 6 when he made his first playoff. Might have even been year 6 when the first time he beat Ohio State. Like it was a rocky start there. And if not for COVID, he may have been fired. I think the COVID season kind of saved him because they had a bad year, but it was like, all right, well, let's reset. Everything's changing. Everyone gets more eligibility. But you look back at his tenure overall, and everyone would say, I think for most people would say Jim Harbaugh's success. Won a Natty. Kirby Smart, you look at his greatness now. He wasn't able to beat Alabama, his former school, for quite some time. He lost again this year, even without Nick Saban. Wasn't able to get them. You look at Ryan Day at Ohio State. That great game, Oregon-Ohio State. Look at his record versus top opponents and Michigan. Hasn't beat Michigan. Has a really poor record against top 5 opponents. I know Ohio State fans, you ask them, they probably all want him gone too, because that's not the standard. At Ohio State, you are the best, similar to what USC expects. So I get all that. I agree with all that. USC is a blue blood. They have the ability to be the best program in the country. Lincoln Riley came here saying it would be the mecca of college football, would be the best program in college football, and it's not. 2.5 years in, it's not there. And so the people that are upset and want him gone, I get it. It's warranted. When you come in saying you're going to be the best and you don't need a lot of time to turn it around, and it doesn't happen, and you're 3-3, people have the right to be upset. When it comes to football, not anything personally, obviously. I believe that, there's so many more factors at play now in college football. And again, this is not trying to make excuses. But when Lincoln Riley came in and was promised all these things by Mike Bohn and company, and those promises didn't get fulfilled right off the bat, NIL was brutal when Lincoln Riley came. It's still recovering. I mean, House of Victory is way better today than it was even a year ago. But there's still issues. I still hear about issues in the back end of things. Nothing crazy. It's way better. I want everyone to be rest assured. It's better and getting better. But it's not what we saw in Eugene, Ohio State versus Oregon, two $20 million programs, right, that everyone talks about. It's not there yet. I think it can get there, but it's not there yet. But when Lincoln Riley got here, it was nothing. I mean, Mike Bohn didn't even believe in NIL. They created this Boulevard collective, and that shut down basically because he didn't support it at all. They said, yeah, you can do it, and then didn't support it. Jen Cohen comes in. They obviously talk meat. There's a lot of powers at will, we need this, we need that, and it's going to take some time. It's a brand new administration, brand new athletic director. She built success at Washington. She's the one that hired Calen DeBoer. She didn't hire Lincoln Riley. So there's going to be some, not necessarily pushback, but some time to get things needed, and seemingly those things have all happened. It's just taken some time. They have the facilities being built. They fundraised that. NIL is getting way better. All this stuff down the line. But, that took time. That was a new administration that came in that now had to meet things that Lincoln Riley and his staff were promised that now were a year and a half behind. Then you look at the whole Alex Grinch thing. That was the big mistake. Obviously, that set Lincoln Riley back. I've said, I think, on the show before that I see this more as year 1.5 than year 3. Like it, love it, disagree with that, hate it, argue, whatever. That's what I believe. It's more like 1 per year 5 because you kind of reset. And it obviously happened too late. It was a mistake. Don't need to belabor it. We talk about that all the time. It was a huge blunder on his part by letting that defensive staff come back after year 1, seeing how the season ended. But this is a brand new defensive staff, a lot of new defensive starters, whole new defensive system. So there's going to be growing pains, right? Going to be growing pains. We knew that. We knew there was going to be growing pains. But to sit here, anyone sitting here saying there hasn't been improvement, I don't think you're watching from last year to this year. Yes, they gave up 33 points against Penn State. Yes, Tyler Warren had an unbelievable career day, 200-plus receiving yards. He was just open every time. Defensive lapses. Yes, they had the game in hand multiple times. And again, in the last waning moments, up 7. All they had to do was not allow a touchdown. They allowed 2 fourth-down conversions. Yes, this defense is not where it needs to be. It's not great. They show moments of greatness, show moments of weakness, but it is 1,000% approved, better coached, better talent, better play overall. So there is absolutely improvement there. The offense is clearly a work in progress also. You look at the losses last year, and every college program loses key starters every year. That's the way college goes. You go from Heisman Trophy number 1 overall pick quarterback to a kid that's played 1 game in Miller Moss. Miller Moss, I don't think he deserves some of the hate he's gotten, but he's made mistakes. Penn State may have been his worst game. Guess what? It's also the best team he's played since being a starter. He made some plays. He made some bad throws. Obviously, that last throw, which I think would have probably won the game, put them in not easy. Every field goal's tough, but very makeable field goal range as time expires. Just completely overthrew a wide open Deuce Robinson, which led to the interception. I mean, he made mistakes. It was, I think, his worst game. But it came against his best opponent, and it was his 7th total start. Going to be growing pains. The offensive line is 2 freshmen, right? You have Jonah Monheim, first time playing center. Not good enough. So again, these probably sound like excuses. I'm just laying it down like expectation versus reality. And so a lot of things are being built on the back end that maybe haven't progressed as quickly as a lot of fans would like to see. But when you have that shift on defense, then you're starting completely over. And then on offense, you're almost having a new offensive system because a completely different quarterback. You have receiving core that is uber talented, but you lose the veteran leadership of Tahj Washington and Brennan Rice, and you're led by all sophomores. And Kyron Hudson. Kyron Hudson's the true leader of that room, and is older. But the star power is all sophomores, true sophomores. We've seen growing pains there. So anyway, getting over it, not making excuses. I think that there's been growing pains that we've seen that have led to this being 3-3. The fact to me that they've been in every single game, they've lost all 3 games by 13 combined points. I'm not saying that's acceptable. I'm not saying this team should be 3-3 and we should all be happy about it. I'm just saying I think we've seen improvement from last year, and now we just need to see that next step to not losing those 3 games, to being 6-0 by not having self-inflicted wounds, by not having late game collapses. They've been in those moments now. They've been battle-tested. So now how do they turn that into those wins? And that's going to be the big thing of how we judge Lincoln Riley on this system. Because at the beginning of the year, the expectation, there's some that said, yeah, it's USC going undefeated. But I think a lot of the fans that knew what happened in the offseason, knew what last year, knew how tough it was going to be in a brand new conference, yada, yada, yada. We said many times, I think that the floor was 7 wins, which would have been seen as a disappointment, but wouldn't have been shocking. The ceiling was 9 to 10 wins. 10 being a blue expectations out of the water. If they went 10-1, or 10-2, excuse me, that would have been seen as a really, really dang good season based on their schedule, based on everything that transpired. And they got to play all these games, but they went out, they finished 9-3. You have an inexcusable loss against Minnesota. That was the inexcusable loss. But losing at Michigan and losing in overtime to a 4th-ranked Penn State, you look at that and say 9-3, that's a pretty good season. But because of kind of how it started and all the hype and how everyone in the media even got behind it, and is this defense different? And then you have some mistakes and some lapses in improvement. It all comes crumbling down, and it's fire everyone, and this is bad. I don't think we're there yet. We got to see now. If they come out against Maryland, which we'll do our preview show here in a couple days, and they lay an egg, and I mean, if they lose, then that's a whole other story. But even if they don't play well again, then there's issues we got to talk about. But if they come out and handle business against Maryland, kind of get back on the winning ways and go in the stretch, but a long way from there. So basically just was saying, like, you know what? It's unfortunate. The team's not where they need to be, but I don't think they're far off. And so that's why you would not blow this up right now. Like, if they had lost to Penn State by 25, then you're like, oh, wow, we got a big issue here. Right? If they had lost to Michigan by 20, we got big issues. But these are one-possession games decided on the last possession. All 3 of their losses decided on the last possession. It's gut-wrenching. It's painful, but it shows they're not far off. Now, to be elite and to be where USC needs to be, they have to finish and win those games. And I know that's why everyone is frustrated, and as you should be. But it's not far off. Now, if they never get to that point, then you make a change too. But from this year to last year, we've seen drastic upgrades, and now they need to prove and get to where those finishes happen. Where those, if you're one play away. You're no longer saying we're one play away because you do that one play successfully. So that's the next step in the maturation process of either this program, of Lincoln Riley, of all that. So that's my general view. As far as the game goes, again, losing to Penn State by 3 in overtime, if you just would have told me that, or I said, oh, tough, but hey, hats off. It's the way they lost that made it that much more painful, right? Up 20-6, up 30-23. You let them go down and score. You still have 2 minutes and the ball to go win the game. You get the ball in overtime. And so there's just all the opportunities squandered away. And that is what made it so painful. And that is where this team needs to get better at. Whether it's team leadership, whether it is Lincoln Riley, whether it's Danton Lynn, whatever that looks like to get them over that. And when you're up 20-6, and Penn State's a good football team. Like, they're third in the nation right now for a reason. I think USC should have won that game. So that shows that they're good. I mean, if you look at ESPN's FPI rankings, whatever, if you agree with those or not, which take in a bunch of different factors, they still have a 3-3 USC team ranked 13th in their FPI. That tells you that this is a good team. They're just not finishing these games, and they had to do that. So whatever it's going to take to get to that point to finish them, as I just said, that's the next step. Now, a lot of talk about that last possession for USC, where they kind of burned the clock and they left it at 14 seconds on that third down play, and then obviously that's when the interception happened. And a lot of people are saying when you play to lose, you lose. When you play to win, you win. I get both sides. I didn't have a problem with it personally. I mean, it's exactly what they did against LSU. They did the same thing against LSU. They had the last possession, tied 20-20. They kind of played to bleed the clock, not give LSU the ball back. Either you win the game or you go to overtime. So I get that there's this narrative always of like, if you play to lose, you're going to lose. If you play to win, you usually win. But it's also, if you would have squandered it and gave Penn State the ball back with even, let's say, 40 seconds, your defense just let them drive 75 yards down the field, giving up 2 fourth-down conversions. Who's to say they don't throw 2 passes and get in field goal range and win the game? Then everyone's like, I can't believe Lincoln Riley gave him the ball back with time left. So I personally don't have a problem with playing to be the last possession. Could they have been a little bit more aggressive during that drive? Sure. But you run the ball at whatever yard line it was. You dropped to 2nd and 12, and Lincoln Riley was asked about this in his after-game press conference. And then once it's 2nd and 12, you say, okay, this is, it's a tough distance to get against a good D that's gotten better in the second half. So do you use your timeout, or do you really bleed it and say, you know what, either we convert and have a field goal opportunity, or we're going to overtime? I get that. And guess what? The play they dialed up was great. Deuce Robinson was open. Would have been in field goal range. Timeout. Last play of the game is the field goal. You miss it. Bummer. Everyone will obviously argue it, but you go to overtime. You still have a chance. You make it. Ball game. 4-2. Everyone celebrates. I don't have a problem with it. So there were other probably instances in the game where there was coaching lapses, but that was, to me, not one of them. They did it against LSU. It worked. They scored a touchdown because Woody Marks ended up creasing one on the 13-yard line or wherever they were. But they were playing it for the field goal to have the last kick to win the game. I don't have a problem with it. Trust your players, right? That's what everyone says. Trust your players. Lance was kicking great. Trust him. Didn't work out. Moss hits that pass. Probably ball game. 33-30 USC. So anyway, that is my thoughts on kind of the state of Troy right now. Big game this week against Maryland. In Maryland. Out there, longest distance traveled for this USC team. We'll be back, obviously, on the USC LAFB show here later in the week to preview that game. Every game is a must-win at this point. We called Penn State a must-win. I think it was. But now just to, the playoffs over. Who knows what can happen in the Big Ten? Ohio State now has a loss. Michigan has 2 losses. Your top 2 teams right now are Penn State and Indiana. Those are your 2 undefeated teams. And so it's unlikely, USC's all 3 losses are Big Ten losses. So it's unlikely they'll have a chance to compete for the Big Ten title, but you never know. Crazy things can happen. So, but regardless, finishing the season 9-3, I think you can take a lot of good from that. And you can show the resilience and the fighting attitude of this team if you're able to do that. And it starts against Maryland, getting back on the winning side, over 500, getting to 2-3 on the conference record. So we'll get into all that. Let me know if you hate the rant. If you agree a little bit, let me know in the comments below. But I'm Ryan Dyer. We'll be back with the USC LAP show later in the week. Thank you all. Bye, Dom.